Hey everyone, before this video starts I want to go out on record and state that I have thoroughly enjoyed the new SCP-Parabellum update. The gun overhaul, the peanut rework, and the numerous other little minor quality of life changes have overall been a great improvement. That being said though, there are still some things in the game I want to address, as they aren't either talked about enough or they haven't been addressed in the current discords. So as the video states, this video will be discussing 049. As you all know, the recent Parabellum update has just gone into beta and has done a complete overhaul of Peanut. From what I've seen, Northwood Studios has done a great job of making Peanut much more terrifying, much more fun to play against, and much more balanced. Overall, the rework to Peanut has been an overwhelming success. The reason I bring this up is that I hope to see a similar update to 049 be done in the future, as for the most part, he is currently the worst SCP in the game. Out of all the SCPs that I've played, the one thing I've noticed from the general consensus, or what I've heard in spectator lobbies, or what I've heard from other players, or what I've heard from server owners that have been dealing with like modifying the servers and balancing, 049 is generally the worst SCP right now. Now obviously 079 exists, and I love 079 to death, and that that whole situation's a whole nother ball game, but 049 is just in a horrible state right now, and he has been kind of for a long time. Now, what a lot of people will tell you is the problem with 049 is that he gets easily obliterated by the first MTF wave. However, I don't think that's the real problem with them. Right now, I think the main problem with them is something that'll have to be fixed in the long term, not the short term, but nonetheless should be the primary focus for Northwood Studios. The problem with 049 lies inherently in the revival system. 049's revival system has always been an extremely powerful tool in theory. Because for one, when you revive someone, you're adding another SCP to your team, an SCP that can kill other players, act as a scout to find other players and stragglers in these ridiculously large maps, someone that can close doors and cut off exits and buy you time to get to a person, or act as a guard if someone gets around you. Zombie, in theory, can be a really good class, even though he's inherently boring. Not to mention, the revival system takes a ticket off. For every person you revive, that is a person not in an MTF wave, not in a chaos wave, someone that can't go against you. So in theory, he's very powerful, and he's balanced in a way to compensate for this. The revival system is very slow, and it's really good for the early game when the D-class and the scientists don't have a lot to like deal with you, and they're kind of like at your mercy. So it gives them time to escape, and you have to make a choice between either reviving that person or going after them. And not to mention, in canon, it's appropriate because the revival system isn't instantaneous. He doesn't just like put his hand on the guy's shoulder and all of a sudden he's a zombie. You know, that's not how it works. It should, in theory, incentivize reviving and doing what Doctor wants to do and cure everybody. But in practice, it just doesn't work like that. In the early game, the revival system is reasonable, but in the late game, it just doesn't work, because in the late game, after the first MTF spawn wave, most of the time you're going to be turning it into an M1 bot, because you're going to have to murder all these MTF over and over again, and unless you have like an 096 to be like the main brunt while you like follow behind and get the stragglers that look down or are waiting to like get out the surprise, you're going to kind of turn into an M1 bot. You're going to be spawn camping the gate B because that's the best thing for you at the time. And not to mention, you can't go back and M1 bot everybody just to backtrack and revive them all. Now, to be fair, that is a reasonable balance, but the fact that you have to turn into an M1 bot kind of goes against the whole philosophy and the lore of like what 049 is. He's a class that wants to cure everybody, but the fact that he has to turn into a murder-hungry thing, no different than Dog, no different than Peanut, that's just not good. And I think this would be at least a bit better if they made the respawn slightly faster in the late game. What I'm proposing is that they make it so that there's an internal clock that slightly lowers the cooldown of reviving someone. It doesn't have to be something ridiculous, just a little bit. Like, it could be even a second worth. I think it would be at least a little reasonable. So what I propose is that they do a slight cooldown to the revival timer. Now, with all this talk, I haven't mentioned the other thing about the revival system that needs a massive rework: the zombies. There is nothing fucking interesting about being a zombie. There is no incentive to be a zombie at any point. It is inherently poorly designed. When you kill someone, you are killing them in their most salty state. You are killing them after they have done everything to try to avoid you, and you are now essentially taking their life, putting them on the most boring class, the most unfun, uninteresting, bland thing in the entire game, and saying, you work for me now. No one's gonna do that. No one's gonna wanna be a zombie because he's just boring. He has nothing interesting about him. And it's not just there's nothing interesting about him, it's that he is inherently not cool. If you want an example of how much making a character or a model more interesting, look no further than this Parabellum update. The rework of Peanut has been one of the greatest updates for this game. It has not only made him better to play, but it has made him more amazing to play against. He is genuinely terrifying as a D-class, as a scientist, to go up against. The sounds, the sound design, the model, he is just so cool. The new 173 is amazing to play against, and I bet on the other end of the spectrum, because I haven't fucking gotten Peanut yet, it must be amazing to play Peanut. It must feel so cool to be him. That is just not the case with Zombie. His model is so pathetically fucking underwhelming. He is not cool. You could make him decay. You could just give him this gory look, and I think it would be so cool to play versus zombies, but these zombies just look like a bad makeup design at some shitter movie I would buy at the box office for $2, okay? Like, it's a 1-star movie grade zombie. And at least with old Zombie, you had the T-pose meme going for him, so at least it was cool, like, in an ironic way, because it was funny, and that was an incentive, but that's just not the case with Zombie. You need to make him cool. And not you need to make him cool from the model. You need to make the sound design cool, give him some gritty like "rrrs" and voice lines and stuff. And you need to make him have a more, at least a slightly interesting attack. I think a good thing you could do is like give the M1 a lunge, like a lunge look, because the current M1 actually tricks the player. It's a hit scan that actually looks like a lunge. It looks like a wind-up. It looks like when the arms retract and then move forward, that's when the hit should land. But it actually is a hit scan. It's a melee hit scan. The moment you click is the moment it hits. But it tricks the player. And personally, I think the concept of like a little bit of a wide-range wind-up attack where you lunge and get the guy, that would be so cool. And, you know, it would actually make Zombie interesting and help 049 because you could slow the player down. I've seen lunge mechanics in modded servers, and in practice they work amazing. It works really well for 049. It helps him, and I think if you could make it so that if the zombie kills him as well, the revival process should apply to that person, and I think that would make 049 so much better. It would make Zombie interesting to play. It would at least give like a pity throw to like the people that died, like, hey, we're gonna at least put you on something that's cool, and you're not gonna like hate yourself for playing it, and you're not going to want to jump into Tesla Gate, you're not going to want to jump off the side of Armory, you're not going to want to quit the server mid-revive. That's another thing that is a problem with zombies, is that because you have to make a choice in the early game of, do I let other players run away while I revive, or do I go after them? Well, imagine if I try and revive a zombie just for him to leave the server mid-revive or just to go kill himself, I would have gone after the players. So he's inherently flawly balanced. But I hope that that is something they put some effort to in the future, so that 049 is actually fucking cool. The last thing in regards to 049 that I have an extreme problem with is that he can't talk. I understand why, because if that is the thing that makes Dog interesting, he can trick players into thinking he's an actual person and one of their friends. And if you didn't have that thing that made him interesting, which is the talking mechanic, he would kind of also be a glorified M1 bot. But I think what would be cool is that if you added a voice modulator over whoever plays 049 and gives them that signature raspy voice, so that the talking could at least be true to what 049 is. That way he can't just trick someone if he's on the other end of 914's room. You know that when you hear the mic, it's 049. I think that would be cool, so that he could still talk to people without ruining what makes 939 a thing. I forgot to mention in the original recording that I think there needs to be a more practical way of 049 knowing if he can revive a person or not. There should be some sort of like icon on a dead corpse to let him know how long till a body is no longer able to be revived. That way he knows when not to waste time on a body, or he knows how long he can not revive a body before its decay process eventually is permanent and there's nothing he can do about it. Well, this is, in short, everything that I want to change with 049. I just wanted to say that the Parabellum update has been an absolute pleasure. I love the rework to 173, and I think this is a good sign of things to come. I hope in the future we see an update just like this, where 049 gets a massive rework and everyone wants to play him, and he's a load of fun, and he really adds something new and interesting to this game. I really love the direction this game has gone, from going from a glorified meme to this absolute beautiful, successor to Containment Breach. That's all I have for today. Thank you, Hubert, Northwood Studios, if you are listening, for actually sticking to the end of this. I know there's like a 0.001% chance you'll ever see this, but a man can dream. And I hope that SCP-SL continues to succeed in the future. Have a good day, everyone.